Oxford University Press is the largest university press in the world, and the second oldest, after Cambridge University Press. It is a department of the University of Oxford, and is governed by a group of 15 academics appointed by the Vice-Chancellor known as the Delegates Civ. The press. They are headed by the Secretary to the Delegates, who serves as OUP's Chief Executive and as its major representative on other university bodies. Oxford University has used a similar system to oversee the press since the 17th century. The university became involved in the print trade around 1480, and grew into a major printer of Bibles, prayer books, and scholarly works. Its press took on the project that became the Oxford English Dictionary in the late 19th century, and expanded to meet the ever-rising costs of the work. As a result, the last 100 years has seen Oxford publish children's books, school textbooks, music, journals, the World's Classics series, and a best-selling range of English-language teaching texts to match its academic and religious titles. Moves into international markets led to the press opening its own offices outside the United Kingdom, beginning with New York City, United States in 1896. With the advent of computer technology and increasingly harsh trading conditions, the press's printing house at Oxford was closed in 1989, and its former paper mill at Wolvercote was demolished in 2004. By contracting out its printing and binding operations, the modern press publishes some 6,000 new titles around the world each year. As part of a charitable organization, OUP is committed to major financial support of its parent university, and furthers the university's aims of excellence in scholarship, research, and education through its publishing activities. OUP was first exempted from U.S. corporation tax in 1972 and from UK corporation tax in 1978. As a department of a charity, OUP is exempt from income tax and corporate tax in most countries, but may pay sales and other commercial taxes on its products. The press today transfers 30% of its annual surplus to the rest of the university, with a commitment to a minimum transfer of £12 million per annum. OUP is the largest university press in the world by the number of publications, publishing more than 6,000 new books every year and employing nearly 6,000 people. OUP publishes many reference, professional, and academic works including the Oxford English Dictionary, the Concise Oxford English Dictionary, the Oxford World's Classics, the Oxford Dictionary of National Biography, and the Concise Dictionary of National Biography. A number of its most important titles are now available electronically in a package called Oxford Reference Online, and are offered free to holders of a reader's card or other subscribing institutions worldwide. Books published by Oxford have international standard book numbers that begin with 0 to 19, making the press one of a tiny number of publishers who have two-digit identification numbers in the ISBN system. By internal agreement, the first digit of the individual edition number can indicate a particular originating division, for example, 3 for music, 5 for the New York office, 8 for Clarendon Press publications. Oxford University Press Museum. The Oxford University Press Museum is located on Great Clarendon Street, Oxford. Visits must be booked in advance and led by a member of the archive staff. Displays include a 19th-century printing press, the OUP buildings, and the printing and history of the Oxford Almanac, Alice in Wonderland and the Oxford English Dictionary. Early history. The first printer associated with Oxford University was Theodoric Rood, a business associate of William Caxton. Rood seems to have brought his own wooden printing press to Oxford from Cologne as a speculative venture, and to have worked in the city between around 1480 and 1483. The first book printed in Oxford, in 1478, an edition of Rufinus's Expositia in Symbolum Apostolorum, was printed by another, anonymous, printer. Famously, this was misstated in Roman numerals as 1468, thus apparently predating Caxton. Rood's printing included John Anke Will's Compendium Totius Grammaticae, which set new standards for teaching of Latin grammar. After Rood, printing connected with the university remained sporadic for over half a century. Records or surviving work are few, and Oxford did not put its printing on a firm footing until the 1580s. This followed the efforts of Cambridge University, which had obtained a license for its press in 1534. In response to constraints on printing outside London imposed by the Crown and the Stationers' Company, Oxford petitioned Elizabeth I for the formal right to operate a press at the university. The Chancellor Robert Dudley, Earl of Leicester, pleaded Oxford's case. Some royal assent was obtained, since the printer Joseph Barnes began work, and a decree of Star Chamber noted the legal existence of a press at the University of Oxford. In 1586, 17th century, William Laud and John Fell, Oxford's Chancellor Archbishop William Laud, consolidated the legal status of the university's printing in the 1630s. Laud envisaged a unified press of India standing. To that end, he petitioned Charles I for rights that would enable Oxford to compete with the Stationers' Company and the King's Printer, and obtained a succession of royal grants to aid it. These were brought together in Oxford's Great Charter, in 1636, which gave the university the right to print all manner of books. Laud also obtained the privilege from the Crown of printing the King James or authorized version of Scripture at Oxford. This privilege created substantial returns in the next 250 years, although initially it was held in abeyance. The Stationers' Company was deeply alarmed by the threat to its trade, and lost little time in establishing a covenant of forbearance with Oxford. Under this, the stationers paid an annual rent for the university not to exercise its full printing rights, money Oxford used to purchase new printing equipment for smaller purposes. Laud also made progress with internal organization of the press. Besides establishing the system of delegates, he created the wide-ranging supervisory post of archetypographist, an academic who would have responsibility for every function of the business, from print shop management to proofreading. The post was more an ideal than a workable reality, but it survived in a loosely structured press until the 18th century. In practice, Oxford's warehouse keeper dealt with sales, accounting, and the hiring and firing of print shop staff. Laud's plans, however, hit terrible obstacles, both personal and political. Falling foul of political intrigue, he was executed in 1645, by which time the English Civil War had broken out. Oxford became a royalist stronghold during the conflict, and many printers in the city concentrated on producing political pamphlets or sermons. Some outstanding mathematical and Orientalist works emerged at this time, notably, texts edited by Edward Pokick, the Regius Professor of Hebrew, but no university press on Laud's model was possible before the restoration of the monarchy in 1660. It was finally established by the Vice-Chancellor John Fell, Dean of Christ Church, Bishop of Oxford, and Secretary to the delegates. Fell regarded Laud as a martyr, and was determined to honour his vision of the press. Using the provisions of the Great Charter, Fell persuaded Oxford to refuse any further payments from the stationers and drew all printers working for the university onto one set of premises. This business was set up in the cellars of the new Sheldonian Theatre, where Fell installed printing presses in 1668, making it the university's first central print shop. He also induced two Dutch type founders, Herman Harmans and Peter de Walpurgin, to work in Oxford for the press. Finally, defying the stationers' demands, Fell personally leased the right to print from the university in 1672, in partnership with Thomas Yate, principal of Brasenose, and Sir Leoline Jenkins, principal of Jesus College. Fell's scheme was ambitious. Besides plans for academic and religious works, in 1674 he began to print a broadsheet calendar, known as the Oxford Almanac. Early editions featured symbolic views of Oxford, but in 1766 these gave way to realistic studies of the city or university. The almanacs have been produced annually without interruption from Fell's time to the present day. Following the start of this work, Fell drew up the first formal program for the university's printing. Dating from 1675, this document envisaged hundreds of works, including the Bible in Greek, editions of the Coptic Gospels and works of the Church Fathers, texts in Arabic and Syriac, comprehensive editions of classical philosophy, poetry, and mathematics, a wide range of medieval scholarship, and also a history of insects. More perfect than any yet extant, though few of these proposed titles appeared during Fell's life. Bible printing remained at the forefront of his mind. A full variant Greek text of Scripture proved impossible, but in 1675 Oxford printed a quarto King James edition, carrying Fell's own textual changes and spellings. This work only provoked further conflict with the Stationers' Company. In retaliation, Fell leased the university's Bible printing to three rogue stationers, Moses Pitt, Peter Parker, and Thomas Guy, whose sharp commercial instincts proved vital to fomenting Oxford's Bible trade. Their involvement, however, led to a protracted legal battle between Oxford and the Stationers, and the litigation dragged on for the rest of Fell's life. He died in 1686. 18th century. The Clarendon Building and Blackstone. Yates and Jenkins predeceased Fell, leaving him with no obvious heir to oversee the print shop. As a result, his will left the partners' stock and lease in trust to Oxford University, and charged them with keeping together my founding materials of the press. Fell's main trustee was the delegate Henry Aldrich, Dean of Christ Church, who took a keen interest in the decorative work of Oxford's books. He and his colleagues presided over the end of Parker and Guy's lease, and a new arrangement in 1691 whereby the Stationers leased the whole of Oxford's printing privilege, including its unsold scholarly stock. Despite violent opposition from some printers in the Sheldonian, this ended the friction between Oxford and the Stationers, and marked the effective start of a stable university printing business. In 1713, Aldrich also oversaw the press moving to the Clarendon Building. This was named in honour of Oxford University's Chancellor, Edward Hyde, 1st Earl of Clarendon. Oxford Law maintained its construction was funded by proceeds from his book The History of the Rebellion and Civil Wars in England. In fact, most of the money came from Oxford's new Bible printer John Bascott, and the Vice-Chancellor William de Lune defaulted with much of the proceeds from Clarendon's work. In any event, the result was Nicholas Hawksmoor's beautiful but impractical structure beside the Sheldonian in Broad Street. The press worked here until 1830, with its operations split into the so-called Learned Side and Bible Side in different wings of the building. Generally speaking, the early 18th century marked a lull in the press's expansion. It suffered from the absence of any figure comparable to Fell, and its history was marked by ineffectual or fractious individuals such as the archetypographist and antiquary Thomas Hearne, and the flawed project of Bascott's first Bible, a gorgeously designed volume strewn with misprints, and known as the Vinegar Bible after a glaring typographical error in St. Luke. Other printing during this period included Richard Alistree's Contemplative Texts, and Thomas Hanmer's 6-volume edition of Shakespeare. In retrospect, these proved relatively minor triumphs. They were products of a university press that had come to embody increasing muddle, decay, and corrupt practice, and relied increasingly on leasing of its Bible and prayer book work to survive. The business was rescued by the intervention of a single delegate, William Blackstone. Disgusted by the chaotic state of the press, and antagonized by the Vice-Chancellor George Huddersford, Blackstone subjected the print shop to close scrutiny. but his findings on its confused organization and sly procedures met with only gloomy and contemptuous silence from his colleagues, or, at best, with a languid indifference. In disgust, Blackstone forced the university to confront its responsibilities by publishing a lengthy letter he had written to Huddersford's successor, Thomas Randolph, in May 1757. Here, Blackstone characterized the press as an inbred institution that had given up all pretense of serving scholarship, languishing in a lazy obscurity, a nest of imposing mechanics. To cure this disgraceful state of affairs, Blackstone called for sweeping reforms that would firmly set out the delegates' powers and obligations, officially record their deliberations and accounting, and put the print shop on an efficient footing. Nonetheless, Randolph ignored TH's document, and it was not until Blackstone threatened legal action that changes began. The university had moved to adopt all of Blackstone's reforms by 1760. By the late 18th century, the press had become more focused. Early copyright law had begun to undercut the stationers, and the university took pains to lease out its Bible work to experienced printers. When the American War of Independence deprived Oxford of a valuable market for its Bibles, this lease became too risky a proposition, and the delegates were forced to offer shares in the press to those who could take the care and trouble of managing the trade for our mutual advantage. 48 shares were issued, with the university holding a controlling interest. At the same time, classical scholarship revived, with works by Jeremiah Markland and Peter Elmsley, as well as early 19th-century texts edited by a growing number of academics from mainland Europe, perhaps the most prominent being August Emanuel Becker and Carl Wilhelm Dindorf. Both prepared editions at the invitation of the Greek scholar Thomas Gaisford, who served as a delegate for 50 years. During his time, the growing press established distributors in London, and employed the bookseller Joseph Parker in Turl Street for the same purposes in Oxford. Parker also came to hold shares in the press itself. This expansion pushed the press out of the Clarendon building. In 1825 the delegates bought land in Walton Street. Buildings were constructed from plans drawn up by Daniel Robertson and Edward Blaw, and the press moved into them in 1830. This site remains the main office of OUP in the 21st century, at the corner of Walton Street and Great Clarendon Street, northwest of Oxford city centre.